Well, hello again. It's the OhioRAAM show coming to you from a nicely warmed up southwest Ohio. It's hit about 30 degrees here today, centigrade. I think that's about 90 roughly Fahrenheit for us more limited people here in the United States. And we're glad to be with you again. And we have a couple of guests with us, the writer Joe Barr from Ireland and his crew chief, Al Hamilton, also from Ireland. We'll get to those in just a couple of minutes, but I want to say that this is show number 50 of the series, and the other number to think about is it is now 13 days to the start of the solo riders in the race across America. OhioRAAM is a group of people here in southwest Ohio who support the first two time stations in Ohio, Oxford and Blanchester, where we staff the stations 24 hours a day, and we have services there available for the racers, the crews, the officials. You can get food, fuel, and you can get a cheer in the middle of the night. We want to offer you that as well as you come through and become a part of the race. We're going to be talking at the end of the show a little bit about our next show on how to see and view the race, so I'm not going to say too much about the times and that kind of thing because we're going to be talking about that at that time. I do want to say that we do have live viewers here, and we're happy to have them with us. It's possible for you to actually join the show if you would like and talk to our guests when they are here. And to do that, if you're watching via the OhioRAAMshow.com website, you simply need to turn that video off and click on that tab which you see there on your screen where it says Join the OhioRAAM Show. And you may be prompted to do some things to get in here if you're not a Google Plus member, or if you haven't been in a Google Plus Hangout before, you may have to install a plugin. It may take you a couple minutes, but go ahead and do it. If you're watching on YouTube, you need to close that down, go to OhioRAAMshow.com, and click on the Join the Show tab, just like you see here on the screen. And just so you know what that web address is, OhioRAAMshow.com. I'm going to talk about the times of the race a little bit later on when we talk about next week's show. But we have as a guest here today, coming from the wonderful Emerald Isle, land of my wife's ancestors, Joe Barr. How are you today, Joe?
Hi, Lee. Thank you for having me.
And I see you're there in your bike shop. You got bicycles behind you, bicycles on either side of you.
Yeah.
You are getting ready to come to the United States and race as a solo rider in the race across America. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm here in my workshop tonight, and we're just putting the final touches to all our equipment, our bikes, and that we're preparing for the race. And we'll be boxing up this weekend and hopefully heading towards the airport.
And where are you flying out of, Joe?
We're actually flying out of Dublin next Friday to make our way to San Diego. We're very kindly being hosted by two families there, the Froome family and the English family in San Diego as our base prior to the start of the race in Oceanside.
Okay. And I want to welcome Lynn into the show here. We'll get to you in a moment, Lynn, but we're glad to have you pop in. But let's go first to Alan, who's also in Ireland, and you're on the crew, are you not, Alan?
That's correct, yes, by default.
By default. I understand by default you're a crew chief.
Yes, I say again, by default, you volunteer for one job and you end up getting 10.
Okay, very good. And I do want to remark on the show that that Al is on a iPad, and the reason I point this out isn't because of anything other than the fact that later on in the show we're going to talk about next week's show, And I just want to make a remark of that, hope we have some guests in here, and you're not limited to a computer, that you can use an iPad, you can use an iPhone. I mean, we had Hoppo on here a few years ago, a few weeks ago, a few years ago. He was driving to his home in Yorkshire and in the UK. Had the phone taped to his steering wheel, and we had a nice conversation with him. And I want to also recognize Gary in here. We'll get to you in a moment, Gary. But Joe, tell me a little bit about your cycling background, how you got into this, and whatever.
That's a very long story. Well, I've been mainstream racer my whole career, my whole life. Professional for 9 years in Europe, mainstream. Retired in 2000 from mainstream racing. You know, I had a fairly successful career. I was never going to be a superstar. I come from a country where, you know, we've had the winners of the World Road Race Championship, and we've had, you know, the winner of the Gyro, and, you know, we've had a lot of big stars. So I was always in the back shadows of that front line. But, you know, I've managed to be national champion on 8 occasions in the country. Different disciplines. I've represented the country at World Cyclocross, World Road Race Championships. So I've done that, and our country is as a landmass as the vid, and that brings its pluses as well as its negatives. And the plus for me was that I was eligible for selection for the Olympic Games, and I was also eligible to represent Northern Ireland at the Commonwealth Games, which is pretty much all the countries that the UK had governmentship over many years. And I represented 3 times at the Commonwealth Games, and I was very, very fortunate and privileged to win a medal in 1986, which was a long time ago, in the team time trial. And that year we finished 3rd, but we were beaten by the 2 best teams in the world of that year, Australia and GB. So it was a big result for me. I retired in 2000, and you know, I'd been living in Europe, and I came back to Ireland and started a family and met my wife and got married. And in 2007, my second son, Ross, was born. And unfortunately, he was diagnosed with a very severe brain tumour. And that changed and redirected my life. And in 2009, I decided to do an event, a sporting event, and it was obviously going to be bikes because that was my world, where I could fundraise for the Children's Cancer Charity Funds. Ironically, the Race Around Ireland, which is now recognised as the 2nd largest ultramarathon race on the globe, came to Ireland, and I didn't really know anything about ultra racing per se. I knew it existed, but I didn't really know the detail. And I put together what is still my mainstream of crew that I thought I needed, and I made a plan, and I set off to do the Race Around Ireland. And in 2009, I was up against Fabio Biosalo, who was the ultramarathon world champion at that time. And after the 4.5 days in Ireland, I beat Fabio, and subsequently won the first World Cup race that I ever rode. That sort of set the precinct, and from that point I felt I became an ultramarathon racer. So that's really how I've arrived there. You know, the next step for me was obviously, it was a qualifier for OhioRAAM, and I spent 2 years thinking about, do I really need to do it? Would I like to do it? Could I raise the funds to do it? Blah blah blah. And in 2012, I managed to do that, but wasn't very successful in the race. You know, made a lot of rookie mistakes, and had a real good education from it, to be honest. There's nothing negative about my race in 2012. Matter of fact, I think it has turned out to be very positive. I met a lot of great people that paved the way for what we have now in 2014. And I've also got connected with a lot of fantastic, inspirational people in the US because of it. So it's been a great journey.
Well, it's not that uncommon for that kind of thing to happen, particularly with a rookie. But you're coming back with a lot of experience. Let me ask you a question, Joe. When did the Race Around Ireland start?
Race around Ireland, the first inaugural race here was 2009. It's a very difficult race. It circumnavigates the complete island of Ireland in an anti-clockwise manner. Um, in Ireland, it's pretty common knowledge globally that we're pretty green here, but that's due to the sheer amount of rain we have. And Ireland lends itself to being a very tough race because usually it has quite bad weather, a lot of wind and a lot of rain. And the actual terrain itself is very, very difficult. Arguably, I would say it's more difficult than the terrain in America. And I think that every racer, like all the top guys have been here. Christoph Strasser came last year. I remember going to see him in the nighttime. And it was gale force, storm winds, and it rained for the full duration of his race. And he told me afterwards that he felt that it was really difficult. It's just short of 1,500 miles in very difficult conditions and very difficult to navigate. Very unlike America, it's so easy to make a big navigational mistake in Ireland, and it's also very, very difficult to correct it if you do make it. I felt that for rookies in 2009, we done a good job. We done a very good job, but we had the advantage that I had raced all over Ireland, everywhere. I knew all the roads, I knew the wind directions, and in our island of Ireland, we only have really one wind direction in the island, and it's a southwesterly south wind. So no matter what way it is, you have the full length of the island in a headwind. So it's 400-mile headwind.
Yeah. Well, I can testify to the fact that it's easy to get lost in Ireland.
For sure.
I've been lost there. I've told people who want to drive there, I said, you want to exercise your lungs because when you come around a corner and there's a lorry coming the other way, you want to suck in so your car gets a little narrower on some of these roads. But
now the only road that really in the U.S. and RAM that resembles Ireland is the neutralized bike path leaving Oceanside. That's the only thing that really has a resemblance to the road width in Ireland. The rest of it's like auto route.
Well, let's get over to Al here. He's going to be your crew chief. Were you on Joe's crew 2 years ago, Al?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be part of the crew that participated in 2012. Myself and a few others who have been supporting Joe over the years were asked to go along and take part in the adventure.
Okay, and tell me what your crew looks like, and I understand you could still use a crew member.
Yeah, at the moment we have had not a major issue, but an issue which has come to light in that we're one person short. We require an RV driver. The person that was due to do it through personal reasons has had to withdraw their support, and we're now at the stage we're 13 days away from the start of the race, and we need somebody to come on board to be an RV driver.
Okay, well let's. This is a good time as any to talk a little bit about the situation as it relates. We were talking before we went on the air about this, and Joe, chime in here anytime you want to. We're talking about mainly the expense of European teams and British teams coming to the United States, particularly airfare and other expenses related to that. So first of all, let's make a little pitch. If there's anybody out there that would like to help this, everybody in the United States claims they have Irish descendants, so it's time for one of you to step up to the bar and say, hey, I'd like to help. I think I could drive an RV. Now, this is not an easy job, let me tell you. Is that not right, Alan? You're asking for a significant commitment.
Oh yes, it's a commitment. It's going to take at least 8 days to get across America. It's not going to be 8 days continuous driving. That would be insane. But there will be a lot of driving, a lot of long hours, a lot of tedious hours. But we get there in the end. It will be a shared responsibility. You will be expected to pull your weight and maybe step out outside your comfort zone to try and help the team to achieve the aim, which is to get across America.
And so if you want you'd like to be in on this, you said, I don't understand what the race across America is all about. I don't understand what ultracycling is all about, but it sounds interesting to me. They'd be glad to talk to you. And I tell you what, the best way to get in touch with these guys, well, we'll be talking about their website here in a moment, but if you think you can help in any way, or maybe not drive an RV, another vehicle, because I know there's other people looking for crews, why don't you just go to the website, OhioRAAMshow.com, and you'll find a place you can fill out an app, or not an app, fill out a contact sheet and say, I would be interested to help on a crew, and I'll put you in touch with Joe and Al, or if you want to do something else, why, we can find you a place there. But what we were talking about, Joe, earlier, let's talk a little bit about that, was the expense. And one of the ways of cutting expenses for you across the pond, as we say, is to find more people in the United States who would be willing to crew. Because getting the funds is tough, is it not, Joe?
Without a doubt. You know, we live in a globe at the moment that's economically, you know, under pressure. Europe especially has become very, very, very difficult. Like, you know, mainstream countries like Spain and Italy that are very, very supportive of cycling from a corporate point of view and sponsorship point of view has really found itself, you know, in hard times. And whenever you're not mainstream world tour, and you're doing like a dimension of the sport like ultramarathon is, then it becomes even more difficult. And when you're European based, you know, as we spoke earlier, you know, Ireland's probably geographically the closest location from European landmass to US, and you know, we just to get our people on flights and to get our equipment shipped that's required to be able to meet the requirements of the race to be remotely competitive. You know, we're looking at the moment we're looking at the thick end of $20,000 just to make that happen. And that's before you get the fueling and food and.
I was going to say, that doesn't cover your expenses here.
No, that just gets you. That just really gets your people and your equipment, you know, to California, and it's very, very difficult. Like, and I just think that the sport itself is actually suffering because of that, because you have all these good, really good riders who are European based. They're struggling to make the start, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with their capability to ride the race. It's just they can't get there. They can't afford it. And, I just think that there needs, if we had if ultramarathon world had a pool of riders of volunteers that European teams and US based teams can, you know, can source people from, I think that it will assist the sport. It will certainly assist the race across America, and likewise, you know, that, for example, people coming from the US to do race around Ireland would have to experience the same difficulties. So we're losing out as a country. So I just think the sport itself needs to help itself here. It needs to take charge of its own world and take some of that pressure away from what I see as the riders paying at the moment.
Well, I think one of the saddest things about the whole sport of ultracycling, and it's not just this sport, but we have these extraordinarily good riders who are contenders.
Yeah.
They're contenders to win, who can't get here.
Yeah.
And that is so sad. And so I, before the show, I kind of got a little burr under my saddle. I think I'm going to try to start a little campaign, and maybe what little impact I might have, but talk to some other people. Let's try to get a pool of people who would be willing to crew, who'd be willing to take on this job of getting little sleep and crossing the country in a vehicle at 20 miles an hour, and when you sleep while you're. It's a tough job, but think of the excitement. You're going to be supporting some of the toughest athletes in the world. So let's, okay, Americans, let's get on this and see if we can't help some of these people. And like I said, if you'll go to the website, if you'd be interested at all, I know there's other people looking for support. So we'll help you any way we can, Joe.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm personally very fortunate. I'm very privileged, and I've had a huge amount of reach from the American people this time. Simply because I realized in my last trip that without that connectivity with the US, that it was going to be very difficult for us to return again from that financial point of view. But as I say, I've been very fortunate. There's been a lot of individuals, a lot of corporations, a lot of CEOs have reached out to us and made our trip possible. And I was very fortunate in 2012 that again, as Alan would say, by default, I met Len Forkos. He was on the road in front of me in 2012, and I could see that over the first few days that he wasn't what I would have classified a mainstream racer. I seen a guy who had come, for a big challenge, and he'd taken it on, and he was doing so well. It was very inspirational. And when I went out of the race, what he was doing and how he was doing it interested me, because I could see a rookie making a huge effort and I was looking at it purely from a riding point of view, and how he was managing that process, and we supported him along the road, and I was so pleased for him when I seen him at the finish, because he was enduring the enjoyment of finishing that I had failed to do, and I knew what that was like, so I had a lot of respect for it, and I contacted them afterwards, and we've built a great relationship and a great friendship since. It's been very good.
Well, now, Len and Gary, I haven't forgot about you down there. We'll get to you. But before we go any further, Joe, you race in support of a charity that I think I'd heard of before but didn't know that much about, and that's HopeCam. You want to tell us a little bit about what HopeCam is? And I believe you have probably a child that has impelled you into this particular charity.
Yeah. Well, yes, I do. My child actually hasn't, but Len's child has, and Len was the instigator of the okay. Foundation of the charity in 2003, and it's a very simple tool that we have in today's world. Basically, it's a digital connection for homebound children who are isolated due to the treatment of cancer, primarily with their schools and their school friends. And it grew out of Len's own situation with his child, Matt, who was diagnosed with leukemia, and I'm sure Len will get on to tell you about that. And he, Matt's main problem at that time, was the connectivity with his school friends and whatever. So Len set about setting up. Back then, it was a cam and a web tool and a connectivity to the schools, and got them connected, and grew the charity from there. And in 2007, when my own child was in that situation, I understood it. And when I met him in 2012, I started to interrogate here in Ireland if that type of facility was available. We had a few efforts of it that was not sustainable due to there was no real mechanism that was continually funding it, so it died away. So when I made contact with Len after the race, he educated me on how it worked, and I said that if I could get back to RAM, that I would use the template that he used in 2012, where he raised an astonishing amount of money in 12 days. Like, he raised $335,000 in 12 days for the charity. And his whole race and what he achieved was so successful. You'd be foolhardy to not take it on board as a model that you could work from, and you could make that more sustainable. So my aim in 2015 is to bring that charity and that functionality to Ireland in connection with Len and what he's doing in the US.
Good. Well, Len, we have you here. How are you today, Len?
Doing just fine, Lee. Thank you very much.
And we're tickled to death to be able to tell a little bit about HopeCam, and I put the let me put up on the screen for our viewers the website for Joe, teamjoebarr.com. But if you look at the show notes, so OhioRAAMshow.com, you'll find a link to his website, and you also find a link there, Len, to the HopeCam website as well. So what more can you tell us about HopeCam and so forth? We just dropped Al out here. Hopefully he'll come back. He's had a little bit of connection problems there. So Len?
Yeah, Lee. Well, first thing I'd like to say is what a class act Joe Barr is. I had a chance to chat with Joe for about 15 minutes as we were going over Pagosa Pass, and that was just about the time when Joe was starting to feel the effect of the altitude sickness that later derailed him. And over the course of the next several days, I was going through Kansas. I kept passing this RV filled with guys drinking beer and cheering for me. And at first, it was kind of strange thinking, who would be cheering for me? And there it is, Joe and his crew. And they drive up every hour or so and go ahead, and they all get out of the van and they'd be cheering. And for the next several days, Joe made an effort to cheer for every solo rider, every group rider that came through. It just shows you what a class act he is, what a great sportsman he is. Here's a guy who, at great expense and great effort, comes across the country to race in our country, and is sidelined by just he almost died. I mean, his lungs almost collapsed from the oxygen deprivation, and here he is thinking about other people as I'm trying to make it to Annapolis, and that was when Joe and his team learned about what our cause was, which was to raise money and awareness for childhood cancer and to help connect more children that are homebound to their friends at school. It's the loneliest time of their life when they're going through cancer treatment. They can't be with their friends, and we figured out a way to do it using webcams and iPads. And so Joe got to know our crew and our mission and what we were all about. And when after the race was over, I saw him at the banquet, and we talked for a little bit. And then over the course of the summer and the fall, we started Skyping, and we had a great common denominator. We're both dads with kids that have survived cancer, and he really wanted to find a way to help bring HopeCam to Ireland, and he tried hard to put it together for last year, and it didn't come through. But we're just so proud that he's taken on our charity to raise awareness and resources, and we're supporting him in every way we can. And like I said, I can't tell you how much I think about Joe Barr.
Well, Len, it was just such a surprise and a delight to see you pop in here and become a part of the show. We're just so glad to have you, and so glad to try to say a word about HopeCam. And again, on the show notes, OhioRAAMshow.com show notes for this show, you'll see a link to your website as well as to Joe's website and his Facebook page. But like I said, I had heard about efforts like this, but I hadn't had any connection, and just want to say a lot about it. Well, before we go any further, I want to go over here and talk to Gary. Tell me. Well, I got to turn your mic on, Gary.
How you
there
doing?
You are. Where are you from, Gary?
London.
You're in London, and do you know Joe, or how you happen to pop in here?
Do I know Joe? Well, I was best man at his wedding. He was best man at my wedding. His youngest son is my godson, and we've spent about 20-odd years going to bike races together. I used to be his mechanic and soigneur. So, yeah, we know each other quite well.
Okay, well, great.
Hello, Alan.
Hey, Gar.
Well, I'm so glad you did that, Gary. That's wonderful. And have you got any questions or comments about Joe, or questions for him?
You might want to ask me questions about Joe.
What do you know about Joe we haven't learned that you can tell on a public show like this?
Yeah, I mean, his commitment to the cause, whatever he's doing. I mean, it's 100%, and looking back for those years past, I mean, it was tough, and I'm pretty sure Joe would agree. We had some unorthodox ways of raising funds to go to the World Championships, and we just did some stupidly incredible things together. You know, Joe knows my opinions on the RAAM and ultra marathon cycling are a little bit different. I'm a huge fan of some of it, but I mean, his commitment as an athlete, I mean, you just can't question it. I mean, it verges on stupidity.
Well, as I say sometimes, for which Fred and Rick Bothling are delighted to hear me say this, we're not officially affiliated with the Race Across America. We're totally independent, so we've had people say their piece about this, and you know, it is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's bonkers. I mean, you know, just participating and completing, whether you're a part of a team or a solo or, you know, whatever you're doing. I mean, it's commendable, but it needs to be put out there a little bit more. I mean, it's sort of pretty much standalone, it's sort of independent, which then, as Joe already pointed out, it makes funding difficult. It's hard enough to find funding in the mainstream for bike racing. I mean, God knows I've tried over the years, and you know, just getting on the road from Europe is a big deal. I mean, hats off to him. I mean, it's just a really tough thing to do, just to get to the start line.
Well, and we're doing what we can here to make it better known. We've had a lot of discussions here on the show off and on about publicity and why it doesn't get more publicity than it does. It's a very difficult race to cover. I mean, when you're spread over 3,000 miles, and sometimes your racers can be spread over 1,000 miles from the first ones to the last. It is a difficult race to cover, but we're doing what we can to pump up our profile here, and I might say, without letting any saying too much, this year we do have a couple of personalities in the race that might bring some attention to it. Hopefully it does, without detracting from their participation. Let's put it that way. I don't think that would be right, but at the same time, they're persons who tend to attract cameras and reporters and what have you. So
I think that'll be all. I think that's good, Lee, for the sport. I think that if you have personalities for that, you know, regardless of what background of sport that they come from, if they bring the positivity, bring the media, then
exactly.
it's a big contribution. Like, because at the end of the day, you know, from a rider's point of view, you can view this two ways. You know, I've come through mainstream racing, and you know, my sell-by date's well gone in mainstream racing, and I understand that. However, you know, I've also come to understand that there's more to cycling than just mainstream racing and World Tour. You know, there's other elements of it, and you know, okay, it's a different dimension, but I think it's a dimension of the sport that lends itself to allow individuals who've had a career or are in another career to put some, you know, true legacy to what they're doing. And for me, you know, ultramarathon racing, yeah, it's a race, and we treat it as a race as a rider. However, you know, it's like Len has said here. You know, we're committed to other things as well as just the race. And if we can achieve that legacy up and above the result in a race that is probably only really important to us as persons ourselves, really, then I think that it's worth it doing. Like, and for me, anyhow, I can hold my hand up and say that yes, I want to go and race the Race Across America as a bike race, but I also want to try and achieve something for what Len and myself are working on as a legacy to that. And you know, one thing I learned about 2012 RAAM and how it differs to mainstream, and I said this to Len recently in a conversation we had, where in mainstream racing, unless you're 1, 2, 3, then it just doesn't matter. It's just not important. But when you finish Race Across America, it doesn't really matter whether you finish first or you finish last. You get the same accreditation for getting across. And that's the bit that's the bit I liked about it. It was people just commended you for doing it, and that was it.
I mean, I think the skill would be to get the balance of allowing regular people to use the RAM for fundraising and awareness, but also with some good media work, you can probably bring back, or you can probably bring to the race slightly better quality athletes, which then, in a way, will increase its presence. And like Joe said, it would add longevity to former good road riders, etc's careers. I mean, if you look at it, it tends to be older guys who are probably the better riders. You know, it's a completely different concept to riding a 3-week stage race, riding 120 miles a day. In all sorts, it's completely different. But as the increase in media coverage,
well, I think that this year, I think two things. First thing, you know, I have a great respect for Christoph Strasser as a rider. You know, I've got to know him, not really closely, but quite well. You know, we've raced across Italy, and he's been here to Ireland, and you know, I met him in the States, whatever, and he's a super person. I know from mainstream racing that if Christoph were to be on a World Tour team, he's very capable of being a World Tour rider. So ultramarathon racing has the capability, and that was one of the things that this time, my trip to Race Across America, that I realized in 2012 that we needed as an absolute tool in our toolbox, and that was to infiltrate mainstream TV media coverage across the US. And my team this year, I've been very fortunate to team up with a gentleman in Washington called Tony Cully Foster. And Tony is a very connected Irish American who has had borders on a legendary career in media and politics, and he has very kindly negotiated a contract with the MHZ networks based in Washington to cover my team in Race Across America. So effectively, we're putting, you know, my team representing Ireland into 40 million households in the US, and I believe, you know, Glenn already is very familiar with the back office to what we've put together, and I'm sure he'll elaborate on that in a moment and what that means for the charity as well. So for to put an Irish team into 40 million households in the US mainstream TV, I think we've done a good job.
Yeah, well, one comment I wanted to make kind of passed by was Len talking about your crew cheering him on and others in the race, and that speaks a lot about the Race Across America and ultra racing in general. It's very much a family sport. I mean, we're all part of a family, and I have seen people aid one another, cheer one another on. It's really quite remarkable. And Len, did you have any comments on what Joe just had to say about what's going on publicity-wise?
No, I think it's phenomenal. What Joe didn't say was he's going to be on Ireland Today every day during the race. And
wow.
Tony Cully Foster is just a marvelous human being. He ran across the United States in 80 days back in 1976 before anyone knew anything about sports nutrition. So there's a kindred spirit there too with Tony Cully Foster, and I had the pleasure of meeting him several weeks ago. But I think what's really fascinating here for me is how Joe saw you know, what my mission was, which was to raise awareness and resources for kids that are going through a really rough patch in their life, and how he really wanted to come back and avenge the course and do it for a good purpose and do it for a cause. And many of the other shows I've watched, Lee, a lot of that really resonates with many of the athletes. Is that, you know, we're all doing this to test ourselves physically and to find those boundaries and compete. and so forth. But so many of the athletes that are doing this are really trying to create awareness and using RAM as an opportunity to be able to send a larger message. And I think people in their heart really support athletes that want to do good and want to make the world a better place and use their gifts that God has given them to create awareness and to create resources. And there's nothing more grand than that. And we see it as we see the sports of triathlon and ultra distance running and ultra cycling. It grows because people are doing it not for themselves, but they're doing it to help raise awareness for something that's really valuable and important. I don't know how much more time we have, Lee, but if I can take 30 seconds.
Sure, go ahead.
I wrote a book about it, and it's called What Spins the Wheel. Comes out in a week. And it's all about Race Across America, but it's really about the story of the real unsung heroes in RAM, which are the crew. And my book it's a business book, but it's about leadership, and it's about that nothing can beat a team that believes in its mission. And we were fortunate. My team, their mission was helping kids with cancer, and the things that they went through to be able to communicate that, the way they had to learn to forgive each other when they screwed up, the way that they worked together to support me, how unselfish they were and how positive they were to be in a 15 to 20 mile per hour camping trip. And the athletes are out there on the bike, but the real unsung heroes of RAM are the crew, because and Joe and every athlete that's done RAM will tell you your crew will make or break you. So that's what my story is about, which is about the mission-driven element of a crew that really believed in what they were doing. And I think that's really one of the key undercurrents that people don't talk a whole lot about as part of RAM. And I think that sense of creating purpose in an all-volunteer crew for something that's bigger than themselves is something that's what RAM gave me the opportunity to discover. And again, seeing Joe pick up the torch and carry it for HopeCam and doing RAM again, I'm just so honored to be a part of it.
Well, and what was the name of the book again, Len?
It's called What Spins...
Hold it up.
Yeah.
Hold it up there. I mean, you're not going to do any good if you can't do a little bit of promoting that wheel. What spins the wheel? What Spins the Wheel, yeah. And if you go to whatspinsthewheel.com, that's the website for it. And it'll be on Amazon we launch it June 3rd. Okay, I'll put that in the show notes. All the proceeds, Lee, go to HopeCam, and I'm speaking publicly about it to corporations about team building, and all the proceeds from the speaking honorariums go to HopeCam as well. Well, Len, I'll put that in the show notes as well, that link. What Spins the Wheel? Is it plural or? Singular, wheel.com. Singular. Whatspinsthewheel.com. I'll check that out before I put it in. But it'll be, I'll get that in tonight yet before I lay my head down on the pillow to sleep. But I want to go back to Joe. Who's that young man next to you there?
This is my oldest son. This is Ruben. And he's just come out here to be part of the show for America because RAAM's, for some reason, there's a very special race for Ruben. Last time ever I went, he made me this fantastic book before I went with his brother Road. Him and his school friends made a book for me before I went, and it was good. So everything I do around RAAM, I try to include him in. I was sort of hoping maybe he could come, but it's not possible for him to come this time, Rex. So
well, maybe next time, Ruben.
Well, maybe I'll go and crew for him.
There you go. There you go. You know, at Calvin's Challenge over here, I did a show on that. It was a remote show. I was using some new equipment. I did what no one should ever do, and that is use new equipment that you hadn't thoroughly tested. But we got a fairly decent show. But there was a young man there in that 12-hour race whose goal was 200 miles. 10 years old, and I saw by the record he got 180 some. I forget exactly what it was, but I know it was around 180 some in awful conditions. I mean, the wind, if you have ever, the plains of central United States can blow like nobody's business, as anybody who's been across Kansas can tell you. And it was just awful. It was cold and so forth, and he still did 180 miles. I said, there's the future of ultra racing right there. Hey, listen, I do want to bring this show to an end. It's been so good, I could probably go on, but I want to go down the line here and let everybody have their final say. Alan, you've been in and out of here with your little technical glitches, I gather, but we're glad to have you back with us. What would you like to tell us before we go away?
Well, I'd just like to say we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the amount of people who have supported us and shown their faith in us to allow us to arrive at the start line. It's now up to us to perform. Apologies for my outage there, but we have a bit of thunder here, which caused a few problems technically. We're all looking forward. We're 13 days away from the start of the race, and it's another adventure about to begin.
Very good, Alan, and we wish you the best as you try to mold a crew together, and that's not always easy.
No, it's not. It's like trying to build a jigsaw puzzle without knowing what the picture is.
Exactly, and as Johnny Took said, who was Dex's crew chief on the his second attempt, you got to look after the crew. That's about as important as looking after the racer. I
agree. Yes, the crew is an integral part, as Len said. You know, we have to live together, work together, forgive each other's mistakes, and get on with it. There's a lot goes on, which is kept from the rider, and that's to allow him to focus on his main aim, which is to ride the bike.
Okay, thank you. Gary, anything you'd like to say before we leave?
Yeah, just good luck. And Alan, don't be soft on him. You know how I used to speak to him.
Yeah, only too well.
So good luck, and let's hope you'll come back in a better state than you did last time, and I might put a couple of quid on you winning it.
Oh. Well, we'll see how that works out. Does the local bookie down there handle RAM?
We'll see. Best of luck.
Joe, we wish you the best, and we can't say too much about what you're doing there and the charity you're for. So any last thoughts before I go on to Len?
I would just like to add one final piece if I have the time. It's just to let everyone know, you know, the mythology behind how we're actually going to generate our funds. And Len again had a superb model in 2012 where the OhioRAAM have nominated 12 children and 12 families for the 12 days of RAM, and each day we're going to honour one of those families, and we're going to make the connection. Len and his team have very kindly facilitated us with the tools to be able to do that, and hopefully everyone who has been following RAM, ourselves, and OhioRAAM will kindly support us by donating, you know, whatever that they can afford towards the charity.
Well, we'll be watching. We'll be watching for that, Joe. Keep us informed, and we wish you the best of luck. I hope I get to see you. I promised too many people that I'm going to see them, so I have to be careful about that because I'm no longer 24 hours a day for 5 days. You guys can do it, but I can't anymore. Len, what have you got to tell us before we leave?
Well, real quick, Lee, number one is I grew up in Cleveland, so I have a warm spot for people from Ohio. And
that's the other corner of the state.
Yeah, and my mom's name is O'Donnell, so she was from her mom was from County Mayo, so I got a lot of connectivity on this call. But I'm really excited about being there at the starting line, cheering for Joe this time. This time I get to cheer for him, and during the race, and I'll be there at the finish line. Thankfully, it's only 45 minutes from my house, so we'll have a big welcome for Joe when he crosses the finish line at the end of RAM with our Hope Camp tent and all of our supporters. So I just can't say how proud I am of Joe and what he's doing, and to be proud to be a part of it.
Very good. Now, if you guys will just hang around here a little bit after you see it go off the air here, I'll be back to a couple things I want to go over with you. But we want to thank all of you for being here. We will put some of this information, some of it's already in the show notes at OhioRAAMshow.com, but we will add the link to Len's book, That's news that I like to hear, and we'll try to be saying something about that. Our next show is going to be June the 4th, and we're going to do something on that a little different. The main objective of the June 4th show, and this will be the last show we do before the race. I'm going to take a breather before the race starts, and but this last show, we're going to be talking about how you can follow the show, how you can how you can follow the race, and we'll be giving you a lot of information as to when you can find the race, where to find racers, where to see them, how to follow what's going on. And as Dick said to me, or said in a post, we're going to help you become totally unproductive at your work during the race as you use your phone or whatever source you have to keep up with what's going on. And I tell you what, if you do, you will get hooked. And we're going to do that on June the 4th. Also, on June the 4th, we are going to have some representatives from our 2 time stations to tell you a little bit about what to expect when you get to Ohio. We hope to give you a really warm welcome, Joe. And, well, it'll probably be warm and probably be wet, but we want to make sure that you know we care about what you're doing here as you come through Ohio.
Thank you.
We'll have representatives from our time stations with us. And then I'm going to try something that I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we're going to give it a whirl. I'm going to send an invite out sometime after the show starts to everybody that's ever been on the show, a few people that I've tried to get on the show, but we just couldn't make connections with, and 1 or 2 persons that I haven't even contacted about getting on the show that is on my list. And just have you pop in, say hello, and see if that's going to work. I know some of you will be on your way to the United States or on your way to Oceanside. And over here's Al, who's been on his iPad, so you can see you can use an iPad, iPhone, Android device. You need to have the Hangouts app in your device. Just go to your App Store or Play Store, or whatever you call it, and look for Hangouts, and that's it. Sign up. I need to know that you're on Google+. All these people here, I know that, so we don't have to worry about you. But if I have not had you on the show, I need to know that you're there so I can send you the invitation, because I won't do that by email. So that's going to be on June the 4th. I said there'll be a little hiatus before the show starts. I do plan to do 2 shows when I'll be recording sound bites of riders, crews, anybody I can corner at each of these 2 time stations. I'll spend some time in each one. I'll probably do 2 shows at least, maybe more, that I'll put together in a recorded fashion. Those will not be live. And then after that, well, who knows? I generally go into a little hiatus after the race, again, catch my breath a little bit, and organize. And we're going to do some different kind of shows, not all about endurance cycling, but we're working on a show on safety and some other kind of things that we'll be talking about, because those have been pretty high on. So if you would like to know where the next show is going to be and more information on the show, again, go to OhioRAAMshow.com. There's a place there where you can sign up by email and get email notifications when the show's going to happen. Nobody else will get those emails, that address, but those of us here who post information on future shows. Also, if you can give us a like on Facebook when you see one of our posts there, or give us a +1 on Google+, or anything you can do to promote the show. Does it help my ego? Well, of course it does. I'm just a human being like everybody else. But more important, it does promote the sport of ultracycling. And as we've talked here, it's poorly enough known as it is, so we're trying to spread the word. And I'll tell you what, we have drawn a few people in to become interested in the sport, some cyclists, some not cyclists. And you don't have to be a cyclist to be interested, or for that matter, to be involved. But we'll be glad to have you. And I have here tonight, let me show you, I have this cool t-shirt I'm wearing tonight that I have to stand up to see it. See that? And then it says so on the back about the So you come and help us at one of our time stations, either 41 or 42 here in Ohio, or any of the staff time stations, and you'd likely get one of these cool T-shirts. I just had an email from Rick today. He was asking, how many T-shirts do you need? And hopefully we'll have enough to go around, but we'll be glad to have you. So June the 4th, I will be talking about how to follow the show, how to follow the race, how to see the people, and so forth. So we'll be looking for you at that time. We thank you all for being here. We thank for all the people who have been watching live, and then all of you who watch the recorded version. Again, thank you all for being with us, and good night.
Guys, can